Why do I need to go and take my ideas like some little baby and talk to 15 people and say, oh, please, guys, accept my idea? Why do I need to do that? I don't need to do that because as a sovereign person, I know what I have. I can bypass this whole academic system because I don't need to prove myself to anybody at the end of the day but myself. I don't need 15 guys with PhDs who are there to protect their turf, who are there to protect their little cocoons, telling me what I have or don't have is true or not true. What do I need these 15 guys for? Have they studied what I've done to the degree I have? No. So there's no reason for me to go into this academic because it's corrupted by itself. And so, to me, the best way is to go take this mystical approach, the occult approach, and just go know thyself. Go do it for yourself. And once you get to this level, they're right. Know thyself. Know it yourself. Don't take anybody's word for it. Get some guidance, get some assistance, go get your information, but do it yourself. Understand it yourself. Make it a part of your own essence. And that's when you really start to get the insights.
One of the things that, again, jumps out at me as we're talking about this is there probably are ways to use this information for achieving intentions or certain goals. And I'm wondering if you might be able to just put that in context for us. How might one go about taking the next step from studying this and being aware of it to using it?
A lot of people ask me, what good does this? To me, the reason I actually put it forward was not so much to advance myself, but was to provide a channel, a fallback base for people who are trying to escape from Jehovahnism, this Christian, thou shalt not do anything fear system. So the idea was really put forward to help these people escape this type of world, to not have to live with this fear, to not have to worry about, hey, am I going to hell or not? If I start to branch out and become my own self. So the system was really, and it's still kind of intended for that type of person who's very intelligent or has a good intelligence, is looking to go beyond this fear system and what's holding this soul structure back. So it's basically designed to help people really become their own self, provide them with some type of philosophy that is sufficiently strong enough that you just don't pull the rug out from people and they fall into nothing. Because if you're going to destroy one philosophy or de-story it, as I say, you must fill it with a vacuum so that people just don't collapse into nothing until they can, walk on their own 2 feet. So one of the basic tenets of the Assisian codes and the Assisian codes is to provide this philosophy to enable people to escape from this Jehovian world or sessionist world of fear, which is to me a very necessary, much of our political system is based on this system. So the more people we have that are more sovereign, more free thinking, they're going to be able now to have confidence to do what's best for themselves and their communities, because our system, also it teaches how to do what's best for themselves, but also for the communities, because it's based on the sacred feminine. So really it's based more about a philosophy to help people just have this confidence that they do have a knowledge, they do have a purpose to then, of course, go do what they want to do. But a lot of times if people are unsure about where they are and they're always fearful about their spiritual essence, their spiritual being, well, this will freeze the soul from acting, from being able to move. And that's more where it's intended to go.
And I can certainly appreciate what you're saying in terms of needing philosophical framework to fall back on when another one is yanked out from under you.
Yes. What's the other alternative? You can tell people this system is bad. We can say, this is bad, this is bad, but what are you giving them in return? You have to fill it with something positive. Otherwise, you have no right to attack their system. This is part of the occult.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, mass market religion is nothing but mass market occultism. It's just mass market occultism at the end of the day, because they're using words like God. Well, okay, God in our system has a whole different idea and conceptual view than how it's used in a Judeo-Christian worldview. So what we're doing is basically taking our codes, which are based on a truth, redefining them, giving them added essence, so that this God of a Judeo-Christian world sounds almost silly.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit more, just as an example, talking about God and breaking it down using the code?
Sure. God is basically one of these words which we call a pi proportion. The way we do this, and if many of the listeners are here, you're probably familiar with the term called Gematria. But if you're not familiar with Gematria, Gematria is generally the willful, I consider it the willful encrypting of a word with a numerical value so that it's provided with an esoteric significance. In this case, God has a value of 7 plus 15 plus 4, which is 26, 26 being the number of weeks to half a year. This is, again, the pi proportion. 52 divided by 2 is 26. The pi proportion is now God. The circumference then, meaning that the total orbit of the Earth, would be 365 or 366 days. And these are the letters DESS. Now, if you're going to use this in Gematria, in the Isisian codes, what you would show is that S and S is 19, E is 5, and D is 4. Well, if we have 19 times 19, this is going to be 361 days. So we can add either the 4 of D to get 365 or the 5 of E to get 366 days. Now we have the God and the goddess together, the 1 and the 0, which is now pi, together. Now this is the core truth. Now God is basically set against two letters, the letters G and the letter T. Why the letters G and T? Because T is the solstices, and G is, of course, the equinoxes. So therefore, God is basically a word that's saying, look, I am the solar deity. I am the sun. And all things that you have come from me, the sun. That's the original core pagan philosophy, which of course is lost when it gets translated into this more demonic sky god concept. And actually, if you read the book of Adam and Eve, the first book of Adam and Eve, you'll have God talking to Adam and Eve saying, I am not the sun. I am not the sun. Well, why is he saying that? Because everybody knew it was the sun. So they had to make the mythology say it's not the sun because it was always the sun. So God is really the sun. And of course we all come from the sun. And when we die, the theory is you go back to the sun. You live inside the sun until you're ready to be born again if you believe in reincarnation. And so really God is the sun. And it's from which all of our esoteric systems come. Well, the vast majority of them, I shouldn't say all, but the vast majority are coming from the sun. That's why so much of our philosophy is tied to the sun. We're not using a lunar system. We're using a solar system. This is the pagan system.
I mean, my own understanding of it is probably somewhat rudimentary, but I think from what I gather, it's based around the idea that the human mind can't understand the divine on its own, but instead we can study nature to try
Correct.
To get a little bit of an idea as to how the divine may function in the
Correct.
physical. So,
yes. Yeah, and that, Greg's, a very Kabbalistic concept. You cannot, the full essence of divinity is so bright you cannot see it. So you can only see it through its sparks and its adumbrations and its shadows.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very core and classic Kabbalistic held belief. And of course, these get manifested at their very core secretion as a word, because then we can study it through the word.
Now, I'd like to touch on this idea that you mentioned briefly. You talked about how the secret societies I'm going to go out on a limb and say anywhere from the 14th century to maybe the 17th century, were, not all of them perhaps, but in general were doing something that may be considered of service to humanity or positive. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, this is my held belief, too, is that they were very much dedicated to raising man up, to providing, some type of light towards, Western society in particular. You're talking about a period where you had the Dark Ages, and they called it the Dark Ages for a reason, I guess, where you had this really totalitarian church system that was just wiping out the intelligentsia of the time, basically taking what was the last remnants of paganism and basically wiping it out. And of course, from there, you would need to submerge yourself, become quote unquote a secret society, because it's quite dangerous not to be secret by then. And based on everything that you see, yes, we see the Renaissance and the way that science was brought back, into the system. Alchemy and language itself became quite a high level study. So yes, I believe this is very much the case, that these people were very much dedicated to upraising the human spirit. And I think this went on pretty much up to the 30s, at least in the United States. Mm-hmm. And we've really had a rapid decay, which I really trace back to the Roswell incident. For the conspiracy theorists out there, I believe the Roswell incident brought about this national security state. And from there, we've had this very negative influence on our culture.
Well, this seems like a perfect place to delve into some of that. Why don't we just get right to it then? So you have the Roswell incident, that was 1947, if I'm mm-hmm. correct, which coincides, or maybe it's more than a coincidence, with the rise of the national security state in the U.S., mm-hmm. as well as things like the end of World War II and the integration of former Nazi scientists into the military-industrial complex,
yes.
as well as NASA, which may or may not be part of the same thing. It seems like you're pinpointing that as really the time period when, I don't know if you want to call it elites or occult practitioners who maybe were in the upper strata of society, let's just call them an oligarchy, seem to mm-hmm. take a turn from the direction that they had been going into somewhere else that we are now.
And really what people, and a lot of today, it's difficult because today's, the guys of today, they want to idolize Crowley. They want to idolize the OTO. But if, all of this tracks back to, John Dee, of course, and John Dee and his Enochian magic. And I once had one of my earliest supporters was this Jewish gal. She was a writer for a newspaper back east, and she used to, I wish you could make your stuff, available to the public, Dennis. I have a hard time grasping it. But basically, she got into Enochian magic, and she said, Dennis, what's your opinion of Enochian magic? I said, well, the whole purpose of Enochian magic is to basically bring about the downfall of the human race and supplant these angels with Jehovah as the supreme God on earth. I said, why would you participate in that? You're a human being, all right? Why are you going to give your efforts to bring about the downfall of your own race? Why do you want to do that? Why? I tell her, why? And of course, a lot of these people, then this gets linked into the Knights Templar, and this links back and into the Knights of Malta, who truly believe, and I know some of these guys personally, they truly believe that their calling in life is to rebuild the Second Temple in Jerusalem. So now you have this blending of a political agenda with an occult force.